The two battle lines smashed into each other without mercy or hesitation. The ragged and scattered Idixi aces had to quickly form up as an almost fresh spearhead of interceptors opened fire with a barrage of multi-lot missiles, chaff and cannon, tearing armoured plates off the heavier dogfighting craft. It wasn't a slaughter. Not quite. But the difference in damage was telling. As Milk and Cookie banked back into the debris field to let their static charge dissipate and stop screwing up their systems, they watched as the wedge of cadet interceptors began to turn in perfect sync, their training overcoming panic and readying them for another skirmish. The Idixi aces, on the other hand, were still recovering from the first pass. With racks nearly spent and their static capacitors sending warnings to the backseater, they were a shattered unit of barely flight-capable duelist craft. And yet, they charged the cadet arrowhead with the vigour of the damned, doing their duty even until death. The patrol interceptor was a rugged ship, a durable piece of equipment with a design requirement stating it should still be combat capable after taking a hit from a capital ship's secondary weapons, but it still had its limits. Where the interceptor shined was how quickly said limits could be reset. An interceptor landing cradle and crew could, when amply supplied and trained, strip and replace 25% of the ship's armour, dump all accumulated static charge, and replace all spent munitions in under 4 minutes. A skilled and motivated crew could script that time down to 2 minutes and change if they were willing to skip a few dozen safety steps. The cadets, knowing that getting these interceptors fresh and ready for the coming duel was the only chance of turning this battle around, managed to repair 13 interceptors in 3 minutes, 15 seconds. It wasn't a record, not even close, but it sure as hell was impressive, and the watching instructors were left speechless as the crews cheered on their simulated strike craft as they lifted off to turn the tide of this battle. They roared out into the empty vacuum, eyes fixed firmly on the only prize that ever really mattered, the foe. When dueling in the stars, momentum, speed, and the pace of battle are the only things that really are of any import. Fleet composition, weapons loadout, even the commanders could all be brushed aside if you can take the momentum, seize it, and never let it slip from your fingers. So they roared out with rage and fury under their wings and courage, guiding their hearts to face down the aces and make them break. Most wouldn't live through this clash. Only a few would even strike their foe. None of them gave a damn about the above statements. They had a battle to win, and they were willing to spend themselves dearly to ensure that said battle would be won. And so the cadets and aces clashed. Brave 4 swore as she wove between the pair of fellow cadets, their interceptors nothing but broken and destroyed hulks, as one of the 5 remaining Idixi aces tore them apart with wing-mounted laser pods, splitting her fire like every textbook tells you never to do. They were winning, barely, and not by any numbers seen, but their mission time was ticking over to 30 minutes. They were told to hold the enemy off for 30 minutes. Within seconds, they would have held the enemy off long enough for the planet's defenders to rally and prepare for the attackers to arrive. She pushed her interceptor harder, feeling the weight of the G-forces on her lungs as she danced in the debris. She was Brave 4, a sign of nobility and a proud woman. This was her battle space, and nobody was going to take it from her. Her WSO's helmet bumped against the cockpit. She had passed out half a minute ago from the G-forces, and even now, Brave 4 could see the greys of G-lock beginning to tinge her vision, but she had one last chance, one more missile on her racks, and an enemy in her sights. The Idixi ace was dancing behind her, sending beam after cutting beam at the cadet's craft. Only luck, and the definitive bias of Shaw himself, kept Brave 4 from becoming another addition to the greying graveyard in this little section of space. The ace was close. Too close. Back when the cadets had just dueled each other for the first time, Brave 4 had asked that human stud how he did that strange jitter jump maneuver, breaking missile tracks and letting him move his interceptor in unexpected directions. Like straight back. After a bit of cajoling and bribery, he had finally sat down and taught her how to perform the maneuver. She had never been able to do it, though. The training pass would always either cut her off before the gene slam became too hard, or she would pass out after circumventing those safety measures. She'd never successfully pulled off this maneuver. But she had one missile left on her racks, and engines were close to giving out. So the clouds or the depths? Brave 4 decided. Clouds or depths. And so she took a deep breath. Possibly the last she could take, no longer thinking of this as a simulation, and yanked on her controls, throwing the interceptor into a high-G maneuver that twisted and warped the already laser-damaged armour into scrap, as the hyper-advanced aerospace superiority craft danced in the air, stuttering above and back, dodging a blast of laser fire and catching a wing against the tail fin of the enemy interceptor, and falling dead behind the Idixi ace. As the G's crushed Brave 4's lungs and sight vanished from her eyes, she heard the siren voice of her interceptor screaming out, "Fire!" And so, before the black claimed her mind, she pulled the trigger on her stick, sending the last missile in her rack straight into the rear of the stunned ace, sending the Adixie to the deep. The mass of pilots swirling around in contested space was hellish. As many cadets were lost to enemy fire, as they were to collisions as debris and stray shots and other people began to fill the steadily tightening dogfighting sphere. In space, BVR has no meaning, so interceptor pilots were trained to dogfight like the old fighters in World War II. Cookie slammed the interceptor into another high G turn as his WSO burned an angry strip down the back of one of the 114's interceptors. At this point the numbers were almost even, 4 Dixie aces versus 6 cadet aces. Well, even in numbers, not in skill. But as the fight dragged on even longer, exhaustion and material stress started to wear on the pilots. Their armor began to slag away, exposing vital components. The static capacitors started to overcharge, causing the interceptors to slow. Nobody had any missiles left, so all fighting was done point blank. Eye strain began to build as flashing lights and countermeasures taxed the already strained polarized lenses, damaged by the simulated explosion from the suicide ram. And G-forces were taking their toll. Yet they kept fighting on, kept dancing that dance, brawling and swirling together as drones and ships fought behind them. It was almost poetic as they fought. Aces, fighters, dueling like angels in a western street. It was a shame someone decided to ruin it. Captain Rochelle stood on the bridge of her battleship, watching as the last of her destroyers finished being shot or falling back. She looks out upon the simulated battlescape, and remarks to Watchkeeper Selva, "This crop of pilots is good, same with most of their crews." Watchkeeper Selva nodded in reply, watching as lances of patrol carrier fire began to burn portions of the massive ship's armor. "They stand firm and die well, lasers of salt and steel. I'll be proud to serve alongside them." Captain Clayhart Rochelle looks out once more. "End this engagement. The Interceptors made a tactical error not working with their carriers to kill my ship. Punish them for it." Watchkeeper Selva gave a firm nod. "Yes, ma'am. Gunner, fight into the furball. Spread shot, execute." Ryan Brooks Cookie Joseph Kennedy was a praying man. While he wasn't sure if his parents were just feigning piety for popular support, he genuinely believed. He wasn't a good Catholic, too gay for that, but he believed that somewhere up above, God was looking down on him, and St. Joseph prayed for his safety when he took to the air. But his grandfather, the man who hunted down Nazis in the dark with a Fairburn Sykes fighting knife and was shot 3 times in the chest for it, told him something else. Whenever he was asked about how he survived, all he said was, "They made the mistake of shooting me in the gut. That's where my angel resides." He later told Ryan that, in his foxhole, his gut instinct kept him alive when sense, reasoning and emotion failed him. He prayed for guidance so many times, and his gut never steered him wrong. "Son, you've got a guardian angel watching over you. But God doesn't want to meddle in your mind, so he gives you these instincts, unless your angel have a player that controls. Listen to them." He listened to his gut, and threw him with a young woman with a broken nose and hair like a blazing fire. He listened to his gut, and threw his plane into a turn a split second before an anti-aircraft roar, turning shrapnel that would have taken his WSO's head into a purple heart and a wicked scar. He listened to his gut, and threw him with his backseater one more time, gambling on this alien Coast Guard, even knowing he'd be branded as a collaborator back home. So when a sense of dread filled his gut, Cookie reacted without thinking, and laid on the speed, getting away from the dogfight in progress, not even knowing why. Milk swore in the back seat as her head was slammed against the seat rest, and the perfect target lock fouled by the screening fusion torch getting them away. "Cookie, what the fuck?" she asked before everything behind them simply vanished. Slivers, the captain of her ship bound in her coils, watched from the bridge in shock as the final ship of Captain Clayhard Rochelle's fleet fired its main gun directly into the furball. As the patrol ships watched, the simulated beam of sheer energy, powered by redundant fission generators, tore apart the joining interceptors in a split second. In real life, the pilots wouldn't even realise they were shot until they met the matriarchs of all in the afterlife. In this simulation, though, there would be some very confused cadets as their screens winked out, trapping them in the dark of their cockpit. "Tell me who is alive!" Slivers called out to a sensor tech. The captain squirmed a bit, but after she had declared her intentions to run away and leave everyone in the dust, Slivers was of the mind that a slight spot of mutiny would be forgiven to accomplish her duty. And duty has said, "We need to start striking back. All ships, focus your fire on critical points. Ignore all other ships. Sink that battleship." Around her, the crew were doing their job. Her commands were reinforcing their duties than informing the bridge officers of them. A replacement weapons tech began focusing fire, a handful of probing strikes, before finding the right frequency for a full penetration burn. Across the ragged fleet of 6 carriers, The process was repeating. They shifted and spread out, volleys of massed fire no longer mattering than simply trying to survive the hell that the battleship could throw out, as the massive ship began to slowly, mockingly, turn to the broadside. And then ECM flickered and failed. And it was not a battleship at all. When the Lighthouse Doctrine was solidified, a class of ships was left behind, their bulk, mass and reactors unable to move the ship up to the needed speeds without breaking them. And so they were lost, scrapped, or placed into reserve. 3 were broken into 1,000 parts, melted down into scrap, and built into the hull of every Imperial Navy ship to be released from dry dock. 5 were lost when ambushed by Consortium forces, taking fleets of ships down with them. 1 was shattered above Cambria, and fell to the planet during the Imperium's 3rd attempted invasion, achieving nothing. 2 circled Shill itself, providing a symbol of the Imperium's might even to this day, and simulated in perfect clarity, no longer masked by ECM interference, nuclear debris, disguising paint and concealing hull plating burned away by his weapons, rested a ship spoken more of in legend than fact. It was the last of the Typhoon-class aerospace domination warships, a vessel built to break entire fleets on their own. Festooned in armour measured in feet instead of inches, forged from the finest alloys built to defy penetration from even the most precise of laser fire. Typhoon-class domination warships took sustained fire from entire fleets and dedicated mass drivers and laser offense cannons to penetrate and shatter the hull. Flowing rivers of coolant between every pressure hull ensured sustained laser fire could not melt through with any reliability and provided some level of protection from kinetic strikes. It is said the only flaw the Typhoon class bore was that it lacked the speed needed to truly define battles on its own. But as Milk and Cookie stared in awe at the massive vessel, there was only one word in their minds, one fear, as a fleet killer stood before 6 patrol carriers and a single interceptor, turning to begin its broadside. Dreadnought.